Clouser Minnow, created in the late 80s by Bob Clouser, is an iconic baitfish pattern that catches anything that swims in saltwater and freshwater. So let's grab some materials and tie some up. For today's Clouser Minnow, we're going to tie this with this TMC 8089 in size 2, or just any standard bass bug hook. And we're going to go with some non-toxic eyes. This is in the medium size, or a 7/32. Now we can get our hook securely in our Wolf Indiana Atlas vise. The rotary feature on this vise is really going to help with getting all of our bucktail and materials tied in. So we're just going to get started off with some 140 Denier UTC thread in white. So this is probably about a quarter of the way back of the hook shank, and that's where I like to tie in these dumbbell eyes. You definitely want some good thread tension, wrapping both directions and then wrapping underneath. And some wraps just around the shank of the hook, and you will get those tied in really tight. It's always a good idea with this fly to come in with a little bit of super glue on those thread wraps. So I'm going to get that thread back to about the hook point. Then bring it back up behind those eyes. This is where we can get that Krystal flash tied in. We're not using a whole bunch, just like 3 or 4 strands. You just want to get it fairly even on the hook shank. It doesn't have to be exact. A little bit uneven does help with a little bit more natural look. Tie that in to the hook point. Bring your thread back up to right in front of the dumbbell eyes. Now it's time to pick out some white bucktail. So we're going to grab a fairly small clump of bucktail, smaller than what you would think you would need. Go ahead and trim that out. You see that's not a whole lot. I get to where I just have the top third in my fingers. And now I can start pulling out all of these bucktail hairs. So now we're pulling out all of the shorter bucktail hairs out of this clump. And now I'll see if I have any that are, you can see here if I have any that are crooked or going any weird direction, or if I have a little bit too much. This is probably on the larger size of a clump that I would want. You can, if you'd like, to give it a quick stacking, but I think it gives it a more natural look when you have some of these that are just a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. It gives it a nice taper when it's just moving in the water. Now we've got our bucktail all picked out. we just need a tail that's about 2 hook shanks in length. And we can come in here and trim those butt sections up. So we're going to come in here and just start wrapping that bucktail. You're going to get a little bit of slippage on your thread. It's okay. We're just going to try to get those tied in as best we can. Not horrible tension at first, but then you can get a little bit more tension as it gets tied in. Now we'll just open spiral our thread. I don't like to have a lot of tension as I get further back here. I like to make sure I have plenty of thread out by the time I'm to the hook point, so that I'm not flailing that bucktail. So that bucktail doesn't get all splayed out. It stays nice and in line like that. Here's a good time to come in with a little bit of super glue on that bucktail so it can soak in and really lock that bucktail down so you don't have bucktail pulling out of that tie-in point. And I can come back here to the back and trim some of those long Krystal flash fibers. So if they're uneven, that's fine. It's pretty natural look to have them be uneven, but you don't want them just crazy long. Now with the rotary function, we can spin our Clouser Minnow upside down and get ready to tie in our next bucktail. Now we're going to use some Chartreuse bucktail, and we're going to do the same thing we did with the white bucktail. We're just going to find a fairly small clump, trim this off. So that's a fairly small clump of hair. Grab it by the top third, strip out all of these shorter hairs from that clump. So then we're just left with a pretty thin clump of hair. There we go. Now we got our next section of bucktail. We're ready to tie this in. We want it to be just as long, if not maybe just a hair longer than the white bucktail. Come in here and here first let's get our thread right around the front of the dumbbell eyes. Come in at a good angle. We can capture that bucktail. So I like a little bit looser wraps at first just to get everything collected before putting much thread tension. I don't like having a lot of thread tension right up here at the initial tie-in spot because I don't like having my Clousers flared out a whole bunch. We're going to get our thread up to there and put a little bit of super glue right there on those wraps as well. Now we can get some more thread wraps through all that super glue. I normally don't like using a lot of super glue, but on a Clouser, it really does help with durability. Now we can just do a whip finish through all of that glue. Trim our thread off close. Make sure about half of our Chartreuse bucktail is on each side of the hook. And there you have yourself a Clouser Minnow. This fly will catch you anything that swims, so it is a great streamer to have in your streamer box. Thanks for watching.